Let's talk about language production. What is language production? Language production refers to the process involved in creating and expressing meaning through language. According to Leavitt, 1989, language production contains four successive stages. First, we must conceptualize what we wish to communicate. Second, we formulate this thought into a linguistic plan. Third, we execute the plan through the muscles in the speech system. Finally, we monitor our speech, assessing whether it is what we intended to say and whether we say it the way we intended to. These four stages are conceptualization, formulation, articulation, and self-monitoring. Those self-monitoring were processed and presented by Scoville in 1998. Before going to say about these stages, we must know something about the biological foundation of the language production. Evidently, our linguistic ability does not depend primarily on the structure of our vocal cords. For other mammals also have vocal cords. Human linguistic ability largely depends instead on the structure and dynamics of the human brain. Human beings are the only organisms in which one particular part of the left half of the brain is larger than the corresponding part of the right half. Let's study about the human brain first. Brain researchers were stimulated to learn why this language capacity remained intact. The point of this amazing case is that if our language ability is located in the brain, it is clear that it is not situated right at the front. The most important part of the brain is the outside surface of the brain. That is to be called the cerebral cortex. The brain is divided into two roughly symmetrical halves called hemispheres. In general, the right hemisphere controls voluntary movements of and responds to signals from the left side of the body, whereas the left hemisphere controls voluntary movements of and responds to signals from the right side of the body. Now, see the brain lateralizations. The left hemisphere has primary responsibility for language, while the right hemisphere controls visual and spatial skills as well as the perception of non-linguistic sounds and musical melody. The localization of cognitive and perceptual functions in a particular hemisphere of the brain is called lateralization. Brain lateralization for major mental functions under the control of each hemisphere is given as follows. Number one, left hemisphere. Number second, right hemisphere. Left hemisphere is going to be used for language and speech, analytic reasoning, temporal ordering, reading and writing, calculations, and associative thought. However, right hemisphere is used for perception of non-linguistic sound, holistic reasoning, visual and spatial skills, recognition of patterns, recognition of musical melodies. Now, let's see the linguistic lateralization. Linguistic lateralization is the brain's neurological specialization for language. Is based on at least 5 goals. Number one, left hemispheric dominance for language. Second, diotic listening research. Third, it is used particularly the language centers. It may be used again for language perception, comprehension, and production. Number fifth, it is again used for the critical period for language acquisition. 3 areas of the left hemisphere are vital to the language, namely Broca's area, Wernicke's area, and the angular gyrus. Now let's see about conceptualization, the first stage. This may be followed on two basic questions. Where do ideas come from? In what form do ideas exist before they are put into words? These are difficult questions to answer, partly because we still don't know enough about how language is produced, partly because they deal with mental abstractions so vague that they elude empirical investigation. As to the second question, psycholinguistics generally agree that some form of mentality exists, a representation system which is different from language. Conceptualizing involves conceiving of an invention, selecting the relevant information to be expressed for the realization of this purpose, ordering this information for expression. The total sum of these mental activities will be called conceptualizing. According to Leibniz, conceptualizing is responsible for generating message. The notion is that thoughts take form in mentally and are then translated into linguistic form, but there is little agreement as to the properties of this pre-linguistic mental representation. Now, formulation. Formulation is much easier to describe than conceptualization because analysis on eventual output of the process, such as speech errors and the choice of words or sentence structure, can be a great help for understanding speech production. This speech error in formulation particularly may be described that speech errors are made by speaker unintentionally. They are very common and occur in everyday speaking. In formulation speech, we are often influenced by the sound system of language. For example, big and fat, pig, fat, fill, the pool, fool, the pill. Slips of the tongues are tongues of the tongue slips. The scientific study of speech errors, commonly called slips of the tongue or tongue slips, can provide useful clues to the processes of language production. They can tell us where a speaker stopped to think. For example, there are 8 particular types of the errors. Number 1 error is shift. It's called shift. That's so she'll be ready in case she decides to hit it. Decides to hit it is correct. Second, exchange error. Fancy getting your model race-nosed. Maybe the correct answer is getting your nose remodeled. Third error is to be called anticipation error. For example, bake my bike means take my bike. Number 4 error is to be called preservation. He pulled a panther means tantrum. Number 5 is addition error. I didn't explain this carefully enough, means carefully enough. Number 6 is deletion error. I'll just get up and mutter unintelligibly. Number 7 is substitution error. At low speed, it's too light, means too light, maybe just heavy. Change it into heavy if you need to correct. Number 8 error is blend error. The child is looking to be spelled, means spangled or peddled, maybe changed. Furthermore, explanation for these errors in shift, one speech segment disappears from its appropriate place and appears somewhere else. In exchange error, exchanges are in fact double shifts in which two linguistic units exchange places. Anticipations occur when a later segment takes the place of an earlier one. They are different from shifts in that the segment that intrudes on another also remains in its correct place and thus is used twice. Preservation errors appear when an earlier segment replaces a later item. Additions error appear when they add linguistic material. Deletions leave something out. Number 7, substitutions occur when one segment is replaced by an intruder. These are different from the previously described slips in that the source of the intrusion may not be in the sentence. The last blends apparently occur when more than one word is being considered and the two intended items fuse or blend into a single item. Now, if we see an outstanding hypothesis concerning the basis for such errors, an outstanding hypothesis concerning the basis for such errors has been Freud's view that errors occur because we have more than a single plan for production and that one such plan competes with and dominates the other. The most common interpretation of this is that we produce speech through a series of separate stages, each devoted to a single level of linguistic analysis. Errors typically occur at one level, but not others during the production processes. This is the so-called Spoonerism, named after Dr. Spooner, who was known to have made a good many such errors. Now let's see articulation. Articulation of speech sound is the third and a very important stage of production. Once we have organized our thoughts into a linguistic plan, this information must be sent from the brain to the muscles into the speech system so that they can then execute the required movements and produce the desired sounds. We depend on vocal organs to produce speech sound so as to express ourselves. In the production of speech sound, the lungs, larynx, and lip may work at the same time and thus form co-articulation. The process of speech production is so complicated that it is still a mystery in psycholinguistics, though psycholinguists have done some research with high technique instruments and have known much about speech articulation. Now let's see about self-regulation. Self-regulation in speech production is the last stage of speech production, as it is called to every human. No matter who he is, he would make mistakes in conversation or in writing. So each person would do some half correction over and over again while conversing. Now let's see about the deep understanding of this production process after the end of this last stage. Errors are committed only by non-native speakers, but not by native speakers. Native speakers often make mistakes and correct themselves immediately, which gives us deep understanding of the production process. Firstly, the production is not one-way transmission of messages. Speakers or writers self-regulate constantly so as to ensure each previous stage is accurate. Secondly, speakers or writers are sensitive to mistakes they make. So at the site of mistake, they are capable of readjusting messages at the stages of conceptualization, formulation, or articulation quickly. Lastly, the fact that native speakers can monitor and correct mistakes immediately in production proves Chomsky's idea that there are some differences between performance and competence. Competence monitors performance to ensure the production is accurate. Native speakers often use different ways to edit their linguistic performance. Firstly, at the very beginning of the conceptualization stage of the speech, when they find their speech inappropriate, they would start the utterance all over again. Secondly, at the formulation stage or articulation stage, speakers would not like to start a phrase but renew the sentence in part from the point.